Hi there. Welcome to another exciting edition of Cambridge Inside Out. My name is Robert Winters.
And I'm Susana Segat, and we have a special guest today.
Marc McGovern, Cambridge City Council.
Actually, a returning guest.
A returning
Yeah,
guest,
we
yes.
like
I had the pleasure of, although Susana wasn't here, so
That's
it was
right.
less of a pleasure, but.
That's right. You get
Yeah.
to sort of pretend.
Yes.
No, you
Yeah.
saved us that day. We
That
were
was
so
good.
happy you were
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Hey, anything I can do.
Well, we're glad you're back.
Thank
It's
you.
the middle of summer. The city council meets sporadically. So
Yeah.
we want to know what's going on. So we're glad you're here.
Yeah,
Thank
all right,
you.
sure.
So let's see, before we get underway, are there any sort of big items, big announcements or anything happening?
Well, I know that Brian Corr, who is the executive director of the Peace Commission and who also staffs the Police Review and Advisory Board, sent out an email letting people know that the city manager is looking for residents interested in serving on this Police Review and Advisory Board. Do you know about this board?
I do know a little bit about the board, yeah, absolutely.
What kind of things do they do?
So they look at if citizens have issues with any interactions with police that they want to take before the review board to, try to figure out sort of what happened and were anyone's rights violated, or is there something that the police could have done differently. So it's certainly a needed, I think, board for our city.
I think it used to be structured in such a way that they had representatives from different geographic areas and other factors. I think they modified some of the rules recently just to sort of, because it was getting difficult to
find people.
mix and match.
Yeah, sure.
Well, actually, I have here what the composition is. The board consists of 5 Cambridge residents, so you have to live in Cambridge, who are representative of the city's racial, social, and economic composition. Board members must possess a reputation for fairness, integrity, and responsibility.
You're out.
I'd like to
That's
see
it,
that
I'm done.
resume. Have demonstrated an active interest in public affairs and service, and be a resident. So,
I almost squeaked in on the last
You
one.
did, you
there.
did.
yeah.
You did.
Okay,
Close.
but
Who's that
here-
integrity is
here's
where-
the
Right,
good.
you lost you right there.
The good news, you serve as volunteers without compensation.
That's the way we do it around here.
There
And
you
you
go.
assist in education and outreach to improve community confidence in city government in general and to strengthen community police relations.
Yeah.
So July 31st is the deadline,
That's right.
which is next Thursday.
It's
for the
coming up
city
quick.
manager.
Well, it's certainly an issue we've had, the tragic shooting death of a young man just a couple weeks ago now,
Right.
and there was a community meeting that was held. I was unable to attend, but I know Councilor Simmons was there and Vice Mayor Benzen was there, and one of the things from what was reported back was that folks in the community feeling that the connection between the community and the police has weakened over the years, where there used to be police officers that walked the beat
Mhm.
and they were members of the community, they lived here, I think Denise had put in her letter that the officers played basketball on the weekends, they had barbecues because they were part of the
Right.
community, and
Does
that's
that
just
not
not the
happen
case.
anymore? There's
Not
no walking beats anymore?
not as much.
It's also tough because it's a civil service position, so you can favor to some degree local police officers, people born and raised here, but you don't have complete
Right.
control over that.
Right.
But you can have the shifts where they walk around.
That's true.
Right, but I don't think you get as many, and that's a whole other issue around the affordability of the city and everything else, where we
That's
used to
right.
be, we used to be a city where police officers and firefighters and teachers could live and have a home and raise a family, and we're
Used to
less
all-
and
they
less
all-
now.
I heard they used to all live up in North Cambridge.
A lot of them, a lot
Now-
of them
now
did, but
they're all
you had
in
a
the
fair
right-
share, you had a fair share throughout the city, but
Yeah.
that's becoming harder and harder, so.
Yeah, definitely. Just briefly also, I think, is it the following day, is it August 1st, is also the due date for applicants if you want to be on the planning board. There's one vacancy, and there could be more than one appointment made. So if you have an interest in planning and matters related to that, consider that coming up quick. real
Wasn't
quick.
there one more commission?
It's done. That was the Human Rights Commission. The deadline was last Friday.
And then there was that internet commission, the web broadband
Yeah, there's a
commission.
variety of other kind of that are more
So
ad hoc,
we'll
not
be hearing
standing
about them.
commissions. That and there's always turnover throughout the year. I think every month you'll see a vacancy for something. So, just stay tuned.
Yeah. And it wouldn't be unheard of if there weren't a wide number of applicants for a particular commission that they might reopen, right? I mean, that happens.
Actually, the bigger problem is usually an inadequate number of applications.
Well, so for the Human Rights Commission, I mean, you could find that in a couple of weeks they might say we're going to open it up again because we didn't get enough.
Yeah, I usually post those announcements, and that's one that definitely keeps recurring.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's a great way for people to get involved, and
that's it.
People should think about it.
That's right. You can help run the show.
That's
Well,
right.
speaking of getting involved, we were just talking about the elections coming up. 7 weeks until the primaries. We're so excited here. 7 weeks until we get to vote.
You know how the telltale sign is when those white sandwich boards go up from the election.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, so up the street from me, it's like Ward 6, Precinct 1. It's coming.
Well, it seems this is with all the special elections we had. This has been quite a long stretch.
I haven't voted this month.
Exactly.
It's quite a
while.
Yeah. I know the election commission people are thrilled.
Yes, I'm sure.
Please. And so I implore you, if you are elected, stay elected. Do not step down because we don't like special elections.
That's right.
So Councillor McGovern is very happy because even years, 2014, it is a state election and a federal election. Odd years are the city council and school committee elections, so he's actually doesn't have to campaign this summer.
Well,
I mean, you have to work. But you don't have to be actively campaigning for election
for myself.
day. Yes.
I try to help other people.
Yeah.
I remember the
first.
You
must always be on your best behavior.
It's true. The first off year after I got married, my wife said,
"Why are you
didn't
home?"
Didn't you say that there was an off year?" And I said, "Well, now I'm just doing it for somebody else." It doesn't. It's certainly different than running for yourself, but it's still busy.
Definitely. So, Mark.
Yes.
Now that I think when you were last on the show, it was something like January, could have been February, but it was a good while ago.
Early, yeah.
And I think the only issue we could talk about at the time was
committees,
it was about committee appointments.
Yep.
I don't even know what we talked about, honestly. I mean, I run into you so often. But I think it might have been
that restraining order hasn't helped me at all.
No,
you're
not
still
a
following.
No, I think it was the contentious mayoral election might have been a topic.
Yeah, that was a topic.
I don't remember, but nobody had actually done anything. There was no committees appointed. The new councilors hadn't really kind of found their sea legs yet, so there wasn't much to talk about back then. But it's been an interesting 6 months. A lot of high points and low points, and I spent some time today just sort of scribbling down at least what I thought were some of the high points.
You know what I was just thinking? You're so smooth at this city council stuff that we forget that you're new at it. This is your first term.
This is my first term. Yeah, it's funny because it's you have 5 of the councilors that have been there for a while. To some degree, and then you have the 4 new councilors. But of the 4 new councilors, 3 have not held public office before, where I had 8 years on the school committee. So I'm new to the council, but I also have a little bit more of an experience in kind of how it works.
That's right.
Yeah, sometimes it's an odd position to be in. But
yeah, definitely. So I don't know if we have any particular method to the madness here, but actually, I tell you what, before I started just sort of rambling off on it here, if you wanted to just pick out sort of the handful of things that you consider to be the sort of the most significant things that the council did, or if you prefer, some of the things that you took the greatest interest in over these first 6 months of your
since
first
January,
council term.
Well, I think overall, I mean, I think you're right when you said about how we got started, right? I mean, it's always tough when you go through a campaign, and nobody's actually competing with each other the way you get in the Boston races or what have you because of our system.
Right.
But we're all looking for #1 votes, and we're competing for that. So then you take office, and it's kind of a feeling out period to get to know each other. But I do think that I think this council has come together pretty quickly. There are bumps, and there's always going to be bumps, and that's not a bad thing. because I think it a little bit of conflict and a little in disagreement keeps the conversation going, and you hopefully end up in a better place. I'll tell you, when during the campaign, there were certainly individual issues that, some people cared about net zero, some people cared about development, some people cared about whatever. But the one thing that we heard across the board was people saying, we want a council that functions well together. And for the most part, we do that.
I'll agree with that.
We disagree, but we're not disrespectful to each other. Nobody raises their voice. We get into some heated debates sometimes, but that's, again, not a bad thing in my opinion. But for the most part, you don't see that, and you don't see the kind of, well, Robert, you didn't vote with me on this issue, so I'm never going to do anything with you again.
Right.
It's not uncommon, and in fact, it's the norm of this council where you and I might go toe to toe over some issue, but we have 3 other policy orders together on the same agenda, and that ability to not hold a grudge, to not sort of let things spill over, I think is what people want to see, and I think so far we have done that. Now it's 6-7 months into a 2-year term, so hopefully we can maintain that. But I think so far
you'll maintain it right up to the point where we start seeing the next election coming.
Well,
the
sadly that's kind of what happens. But hopefully,
it's part of the game.
Hopefully we can continue to at least work together in a respectful and responsible way.
All right, so Mark.
Well, he didn't answer the question.
All right. So a couple things. In terms of the council as a whole, I think the decision to hold on to the entire Foundry Building,
right,
I think was a great decision, and that was a decision that, kind of went back and forth over the last couple councils, and we.
You mean to have the city not
to have the city not sell it, and to use the whole, and there's some people have different ideas. What was the city really going to sell it? Not sell it, but going from saying we're going to use 10,000 square feet of that building for community space to the entire 53,000 square feet was certainly a commitment that this particular council made, and I think that was and we made it pretty early on in our term, and then we asked the manager to allocate $6 million to start the capital improvements of the building. So I mean that was something that we did pretty quickly, and it's and it passed, and that to me I think is going to be a great benefit to the community as a whole. Now all the conversation is about what goes in there, right? And there's different ideas about that.
Yeah, and that was definitely a source of conflict in previous councils too. That people had different visions about it. So I guess that's a decision that's a little bit kicked down the road because we got to soup up the building first.
Right. I mean, it's not something that we have to decide today. And again, I think it's if people are willing to work with one another. It's not like we're too far off of. The people are too far away from each other on what they want to do. It's just really how do you fit it together. So that was one thing. We did vote to move forward with the master plan, around development, which will take a look at the city as a whole and look at development and infrastructure and environment and how does all that fit together. And that's actually a perfect example, I think, of the council working together. You had one order that came in sponsored by 3 councilors.
Say we're going to do it this way.
They say we're going to do it this way, and then you had a second order, myself, Vice Mayor Benzan, and the mayor were on, that says, we think this is a better process. Both agreed that a master plan was something worth doing. We all supported that. We just had a different idea on how to get there. And then.
So how did that turn out?
So basically, we tabled it for a couple weeks. Yeah. And the mayor, who was the lead sponsor on the motion I was on, and Councilor Carlone, who was the lead sponsor on the other one, got together and said, okay, how do we work some of this out? And what came out was an order, I think, that actually is much better than either one of them were individually. Mm-hmm. And is leading to, already bringing in, the biggest difference was who was going to run the process.
That was the question.
And the Carlone order, called for subcommittees committees, like subcommittees of school committee, committees of the city council to basically hold the public meetings. Our order called for a consultant to be hired by the city to work with CDD and have those meetings really take place outside of City Hall and in the public. Right. And that's pretty much what's happening.
Pretty much, yeah.
The community meetings. And there's been, in addition to all the drop-in meetings they've been at festivals and fairs, and they've held more formal meetings in different neighborhoods, but they've been to senior housing, they've been to public housing.
Pretty much any group
Anybody.
that said, come and tell us
Right.
about it, they came.
Right, and that to me that is why I supported that motion, because to me that's a much more inclusive process than
It
saying,
is.
hey, everybody come to City Hall from 4 to 6 and have your 3 minutes to,
Right.
to make a comment. These are actual conversations,
Right.
and that's a much better process in my eyes.
Yep. No.
So what's gonna happen with all those conversations?
Well, they're gonna pull all that information together, and at this point, it's really about what is it that people wanna see in a master plan,
It's
what
like
is it that
framing the
question and framing what is it we're going to look at. I mean, a master planning process, any other community that's done it, it takes 2 to 3 years to do. So, I mean, this isn't something that is going to be finished by this term, or probably maybe not even by the next term. But we've got it going. The conversations are happening, and then those will continue to happen as the process unfolds.
I think that the whole notion about having sort of a broad plan for the city is something that every city and town should revisit every 5-10 years anyway. So the big bulk of what we currently consider to be the master plan is something they call the growth policy document, which dates to about 1992. It had one official revision, I think, in maybe 2006.
Yeah.
But it's not like people were just completely asleep at the switch during all the intervening years.
And I think that's this was also a hot topic during the campaign, and I would say, I don't care what you call it. I think we have to review what we have. There's an awful lot of development going on. I personally tend to think that most of it is good. But we certainly, you always want to revise and take a look at where you are. Master plan, zoning plan, whatever, to me that we got so hung up in the semantics of it that, how do you have a citywide plan that looks at all of these things? That was to me the bottom line. And, but you're right. I mean, I think that the perception of a lot of people is that, well, I guess because there was no master plan, there was no planning at all, and that's not true.
Totally false. Yeah.
Totally false.
Yeah.
You may not be happy with the planning. You may not think they were good decisions, but the fact is there were plans and there were things in place.
Here's a homework exercise for everyone.
Oh,
If
boy.
you can go to the I'm teaching summer school.
okay.
You can actually go to the CDD website. You can actually download the growth policy document, which has something like 70 some odd sort of basic principles. And then you can kind of look at a little bit of the chronology of what has, as they've sort of mutated the community development department, creating new divisions to address things, and just take a look and see how well matched actually.
Well,
things are.
so Alewife is a hot topic, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so much development, and putting aside the look of the buildings, and that's always tricky. When I was on school committee, I could not wait to build a new Martin Luther King School building, right? I wanted to press the button that imploded that ugly building.
Yep.
But there were a lot of people that said it was the most beautiful thing that they'd ever seen, and it was, so when you start to get into, you like this building, you don't, that's tricky, and,
That's very tricky.
I certainly have my own opinions, but that doesn't necessarily, that shouldn't carry the day. But with Alewife, when 10 plus years ago, when the city incentivized building residential units as opposed to building commercial units, they allowed developers to basically obey the zoning for commercial, even though they were building residential. So it was, setbacks were different, and the rules were different to encourage the residential zoning, which I think was an absolutely smart idea to do. They set certain goals. The problem is that those incentives almost work too well, because now they have exceeded, or at least are, the goals in half the time, and so now everyone says, wait a minute, slow down.
Now let's understand, how does one incentivize? It's usually done, at least with City of Cambridge, through the use of special permit criteria, meaning there are things you can go up, build a circus tent, you could build a commercial, there's certain things you could just do as of right, but if you want to build certain things in certain ways, like a little higher density housing, whatever, they say, okay, but here are these criteria. You must meet this criteria, that criteria, bum, 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 bum. And then the planning board kind of walks you through and say, well, you're meeting all the special permit criteria. I think a reasonable question, that's, whether it's part of master plan or whatever, is, are the current sets of special permit criteria, are they adequate? Do they incentivize things a little bit wrongly?
Right, well, I think, and this comes back to the reevaluation part. You know, at the time, for example, that the Alewife and New Street and all these areas have these different incentives, that was the right thing to do at the time.
Right.
Now, that may not be necessary anymore. And so
They were encouraging
housing.
Now it's
We're getting the housing, people are building the housing, they're building in great numbers. We may not need those incentives anymore to continue that.
So can you stop them?
So you can stop them. As far as the sort of the special permits and whatnot, you know, there are some things that we can do. For example, right now, when a developer goes before the planning board for their first meeting, they have to have, by statute, they have to have a fully 100% designed plan to show the planning board.
Mhm.
So what that does, it does two things. The developers who spend $100,000 to develop this plan and models and whatnot, they're sort of reluctant to make any significant changes because they've invested all this money and all this time. But the residents feel like this is a done deal. You know, you've got a completely fully designed plan. So we're fighting for what color should the walls be or where a tree should go instead of actually having meaningful input.
And even if that's
That's a
not the
good way to look at
reality,
that.
that
Right.
is the perception of
It is,
That's a
and it's a
really
fair
good way.
perception,
Yes.
I think, because, you know, the smart developer will meet with the community ahead of time, but there's nothing requiring them to do that.
Right.
So one of the first things that I would suggest that we do, and Newton was brought up as a community where the aldermen have control over special permits. So I called some people in Newton, and aldermen as well as people who work for the city. And one of the things that they do is that a developer comes to their planning board, their zoning committee, first with a concept and says, I want to build an 8-story building with X number of units and it's going to look like this and whatever. That most of the time they don't even have a design.
Right.
The community then gets to say, you know, we'd like it to be,
We want you to build a park.
gotta be
we
in
want a
there.
park, or we want it to
Right.
be 6 stories instead of 8 stories. Then the developer has to go back, talk to the community, come back to their board with a design that says, here's what the community wanted and here's how I incorporated it. They then go back again. So you have 3 opportunities before a final design
You get-
is
don't get
presented.
boxed in.
And that, I mean, believe me, from what they told me in Newton, it does not all go smoothly, but at least you have a community process on the front end where people really do have the opportunity to have meaningful input into the design. We could
Right.
do that.
Yeah, I mean, I
You
think
know?
right now, the process when you're going to, especially if you're seeking special permit authority to go and do something beyond just building as a right, it's still sort of like a 3 or more meeting process regardless, but maybe not the right meeting.
Right, it's not so much exactly, it's not so much the number of meetings.
It could actually
you
go
know,
faster.
You know what, I'd rather have 3 meetings that are heavy on the front end with community input and community conversation
Yeah.
than have 5 meetings of the community feeling like they've been left out of this process and they have to dig in their heels and fight for something that really they should have been involved with at the beginning. And I think it will be faster, I think it'll be better for development, it'll be better for the community, and it's something that we can do within the current structure that we have.
I will tell you, though, one warning I have about all of that. I think it's a great idea, by the way, but it's the shifting goalpost problem, where you come in, the community puts all their cards on the table, says, this is what we want. You come back, you actually meet all those things, and they go, no, what we really want is this.
Well, I mean, I've had many conversations with folks in the community, and I've said, you know, there's a responsibility of the community too.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of responsibility to go around. And I think if a developer, I was talking to some folks about New Street, and I set up a meeting, it's up by Danahy
By
Park.
the way, some additional New Street housing is the subject of a planning board meeting
Yes,
tonight.
yes. And, you know, I set up a meeting with some folks and the architect, the developer, myself, and Councilor Carlone. And basically, the folks from the community said, we want these 7 or 8 things. Now, they were already upset because the plan had gone so far ahead, they really weren't
Right.
involved. But now that it had gone so far, we want you to think about these 7 or 8 things. The developer went back and made all of those changes.
Yeah.
And then the community is still saying that they're against the plan. And at some point, you have to say, if you're gonna work with people, then how do you work with those people in good faith? And maybe you don't get 100% of what you want, but if the developer's moving part way and the community's moving part way, we'll get to a good place. But it takes both sides to move.
That's right, yeah. People have to actually be willing to actually engage in some sort of compromise. Something's gonna happen.
Right.
And I don't think it would be in anybody's best interest if the only things that were built were things that were just as of right, where none of the sort of the community benefits that you can
Right.
often get.
Right. People have to be, you have to be careful what you're asking for sometimes. And sometimes what actually works out better for the city is giving the developers a little more of something because we get so much more back rather than get nothing back.
Right.
And that's just, you have to look at each plan and figure that out.
No, it's like any good deal,
Yeah.
The thing is, you gotta get to that handshake at the
Right,
end
right,
somehow.
right.
Yeah.
Or you end up, stagnant and, with nothing.
Speaking about New Street, last week we were complaining about there's parking
Yeah.
and then there's no way for
Yep.
there to be 2-lane traffic. Well, this week, they
Lines.
painted
Yes.
lines,
Well,
so now you can actually drive down
Yeah.
the street without
Yeah,
thinking you're gonna get.
I filed 2 policy orders and,
We're down to our last half
Yeah.
minute.
I filed 2 policy orders. One was to have the city look at reconstructing New Street in a way to make it wider
Yeah.
and safer. And
It's
the
a
other
mess.
is to have the manager work with the owners of the Fresh Pond shopping mall to deal with their
Yeah,
parking
that
lot.
line
And
is
so both
wonderful.
of those orders passed unanimously, which I'm excited about,
Yeah.
and hopefully we'll get a better result.
We're very
It'd be-
happy
it-
about those
it'd be
lines, thank
thrill-
you.
It'd be I'll be thrilled if there's some little bit of restructuring on the
Yeah.
Fresh Pond Shopping Center
Yeah.
one day.
Yeah, I hope so.
Right. Anyway, we gotta
I want to
skip-
come back
oh,
sometime.
You're gonna come
because
back
I-
in 5
Oh.
seconds,
Oh,
okay,
I
Mark?
am? Oh, really?
Well,
That's how I'm here for the
see you in
whole
a couple
hour? Oh,
seconds.
forget it.
Cambridge Inside Out.